It's the 27th of April 1986, and across the eastern United States, anyone who stayed up late to watch The Falcon and the Snowman on HBO is about to have their viewing experience interrupted by a person identifying themselves as Captain Midnight. At 12:32 AM, people's screens abruptly cut to black, flickering for a short period of time before a message appeared. $12.95 a month? No way. Showtime, Movie Channel, beware. This message remained on people's TVs for several minutes before returning to the movie. September 6, 1987, anyone watching the Playboy channel would find their signal interrupted by a message reading, "Thus saith the Lord thy God, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." The reasons as to why a person might take over a TV signal committing a broadcast intrusion vary, from the act of protest against HBO's prices that was the Captain Midnight intrusion to the religious motivations of the Playboy channel hijacking. While some intrusions are simply the acts of trolls looking to cause outrage, like the 2012 Disney Channel intrusion that saw 6 minutes of Lilo and Stitch replaced with an X-rated adult film, this obviously upsetting parents, there has been, however, those where the reason is a bit more abstract, and sometimes we're left to wonder if there even was a reason. There are few threats more sobering than that of nuclear war. Albert Einstein is often quoted as having said, "I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." In 1966, an unnamed 18-year-old in the city of Kaluga using his own equipment was able to interrupt a local radio broadcast, announcing that the United States had launched nuclear missiles at the USSR, encouraging people to seek shelter. Given the growing Cold War tensions between the United States and Soviet Union in the 1960s, this was a fairly reckless thing to do. While this hoax affected a city, causing a minor panic as the radio broadcast had a limited range, a similar broadcast intrusion in the Czech Republic would be experienced by people on a much larger scale. It's the 17th of June 2007. During a Sunday morning broadcast of Panorama, a program that simply shows scenic shots of Prague and the nation's countryside providing updates on weather, while showing live footage of a mountain range, anyone watching would see a bright flash, which lasted for several seconds, and was followed by a mushroom cloud. This led to some viewers calling the TV station asking if there had been a nuclear attack or if there had been some sort of gas explosion. Neither of these were true. A group of artists known as Stohoven, whose website was visible during the broadcast, would claim responsibility. They had travelled to where the camera was set up and spliced their own footage into the live broadcast, the group having performed several reality hijacking stunts prior to this. 7 members of the group would be charged by authorities, however they were ultimately acquitted in March of 2008, the court ruling that what they had done was not a criminal act. The real question being, why did they do it? On their MySpace page, the group's About Me section would provide some clarity, stating that they are not a political group and were not out to scare or manipulate society in any way. However, they would go on to ask the question, is everything that we see on television screens every day the truth, reality? Is everything that is presented to us as truth by the media, newspapers, television, and the internet really the truth? Our project is to introduce and remind us of this idea, that project being a documentary titled Media Reality, which focused on raising questions and concerns over media manipulation. During a radio interview featured in Media Reality, members of the group would talk about the sensational headlines surrounding their broadcast intrusion, one person stating this hunt for sensations is exactly what we wanted to highlight. While the incident had caused panic in some and outrage in others, the intrusion making global headlines, it's difficult to tell if it had the intended effect of creating a discussion on media manipulation. Considering the media still sensationalized headlines, if there was a discussion, it wasn't an effective one. Regardless, Stohoven would go on to be the first to receive the 333 award for young artists from the Czech National Gallery in December of 2007, and would cite the influence of Orson Welles' 1938 radio broadcast of War of the Worlds on their project, an event that lives on in infamy where, in spite of announcements throughout the broadcast that War of the Worlds was indeed a work of fiction, because of the breaking news style format, some listeners genuinely believed that the Earth had fallen victim to a Martian invasion, causing panic. In science fiction, aliens are often depicted as an existential threat to humanity, from the pod people of Invasion of the Body Snatchers to the bugs of Starship Troopers. When it comes to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, we often end up coming out second best. On the 26th of November 1977, however, residents in parts of southern England would receive a message from a life form far more benevolent in its approach to humanity, identifying itself as Vrillon of the Ashtar Galactic Command.
This is the voice of Vrillon, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights in the skies. We speak to you now to send the same as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth. Be still now, and listen, or your chance may not come again. All your weapons of evil must be removed. The time for conflict is now past, and the race of which you are a part may proceed to the higher stages of its evolution, if you show yourselves worthy to do this. We, the Ashtar Galactic Command, thank you for your attention. We are now leaving the planes of your existence. May you be blessed by the supreme love and true happiness.
It's bringing love! Don't let it get away!
Break its legs!
Vrillon would, however, get away, as authorities were never able to identify any suspects and no one came forward to claim responsibility. An investigation determined the culprit was able to overwhelm a signal being received and rebroadcast by the Hannington TV transmitter, taking advantage of something that was rather unique about the Hannington Tower, as others received signals via cable rather than over the air. All they had to do was transmit their signal from close enough to the rebroadcast receiver, leading to their signal being captured and rebroadcast rather than the intended one. I had to edit Vrillon's message down for the sake of brevity. However, the most interesting part about it is its connection to a UFO religion that began in the early 1950s. As a person who claimed he received telepathic messages from extraterrestrials, George Van Tassel was what I will call an interesting man. One of his most ridiculous claims being that he had a formula for a working time machine given to him by aliens, which he discussed in a 1964 interview.
Will you tell me now? The formula for a time machine.
F equals 1 over T.
F equals 1 over T.
F being frequency and T being time.
And this enables me to go back to the time of Caesar's armies conquering Britain.
Well, it would enable a mathematician to work this out, yes. Jack, the formula came from a ship that landed at my airport in 1953 on August the 24th, which had 4 people aboard it that came from another planet.
In his book, I Rode a Flying Saucer, Van Tassel documented his alleged communications with alien life forms. While he names many different aliens, on page 30, in a message he claims to have received on July 18th, 1952, we are introduced to a being identifying itself as Ashtar Commandant Quadra-Sector Patrol Station, Share. On page 31, Ashtar would warn us that scientists are messing with powers beyond our understanding, stating, when they explode the hydrogen atom, they shall extinguish life on this planet. They are tinkering with a formula they do not comprehend. The first successful test of a hydrogen bomb taking place on the 1st of November 1952. In his book, Van Tassel would document several more messages he allegedly received from Ashtar and was the first person to do so. Over the years, others would claim to have received messages from either Ashtar or the Ashtar Command, leading to the Ashtar movement. Obviously, I've simplified the history here, but I went down this rabbit hole of lunacy all to answer one question. With the 1977 broadcast intrusion really only affecting audio and there being no clear image, why is Vrillon of the Ashtar Galactic Command often depicted as looking like this? Why not something more traditional like the grey alien? Well, the answer to that can be found in the same 1964 interview in which Van Tassel discussed his time travel formula, where he described a physical encounter with these beings.
This man, in what language did he converse with you?
He talked to me in the best English equivalent to Ronald Coleman.
You keep calling him man. What do you mean man?
Well,
Little green man?
They were about 5'6". They came about to my eyebrows, and they could have walked in our clothes down any of our streets and we wouldn't have paid any attention to them.
What color were these people?
They looked like they were white people with a good healthy tan.
Did they give you any indication of how old they were or what they ate or where they came from at all?
After we got off the ship, the man who invited me aboard, who didn't look a day over 28 years of age, told me that he was over 700 years of age in our time.
Oh, come off it, George.
That's right.
I don't think the person behind the 1977 broadcast intrusion was necessarily a devotee of the Ashtar movement, but I do think they had knowledge of Van Tassel's writings and a fairly impressive understanding of how TV transmitters, in particular the Hannington Tower, worked. Using these things, they were able to create a hoax broadcast with a warning for humanity, seemingly from beyond the stars. Warnings can take many forms. One that usually gets people's attention is an emergency alert. Emergency alert systems typically serve to provide critical information about extreme weather events. However, they can be used to warn us of other threats, and on the 11th of February 2013, some residents in Great Falls, Montana would receive warning of a threat straight out of a horror movie.
So you will if I tell you that all will change first, right?
But if I show you, don't even talk to me, dude. But if I show you, I mean, it might take a month or two, a couple months, you know? But if I show you...
Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living. Follow the messages on screen that will be updated as information becomes available. Do not attempt to approach or apprehend these bodies as they are considered extremely dangerous.
This interruption affected KRTV's broadcast at around 2:30 in the afternoon. However, things were far from over. The same broadcast intrusion would go on to be experienced in Marquette, Michigan, La Crosse, Wisconsin, and later Portales, New Mexico. 2 radio stations in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Los Angeles, California were also affected. No suspects were ever publicly identified in relation to these intrusions. Initial reports indicate this was the work of overseas hackers, one source stating that the attack originated from the UK, while others mention a suspect. There are no names. Whoever was behind the intrusions was likely able to gain backdoor access to the emergency alert systems of these stations because the stations had failed to change the default password on their equipment, which could be viewed by anyone in online manuals. In response to the emergency alert, Lieutenant Shane Sorensen of the Great Falls Police Department stated, "We had 4 calls checking to see if it was true, and then I thought, wait, what if?" The Marquette Police Department also reportedly receiving at least 10 calls. While the threat of a zombie apocalypse certainly is something that will get people's attention, it's not hard to imagine the panic that could have been caused if the perpetrator's announcement had been based on something a little more realistic. In 2018, on the 13th of January, a false missile alert in Hawaii caused widespread panic. Many people believing this to be a nuclear attack launched by North Korea. The panic lasted for 38 minutes and saw people seeking shelter wherever they could and making calls to loved ones before a second alert announced there was no missile. While this was a false alarm rather than an outright hoax, the result of miscommunication during a drill, an alert hitting multiple cities and towns across 6 states had the potential to cause abject chaos, leaving many people feeling frustrated that someone had been able to do this in the first place. However, with the system's vulnerability highlighted, changes were made to ensure this couldn't happen again. At last we have arrived at what is arguably the most infamous broadcast intrusion to ever occur. Combining various elements from the incidents we've already looked at, the Max Headroom hijacking is a thing of strange beauty. It's the 22nd of November 1987, and in Chicago, the evening broadcast of WGN TV's 9 o'clock news is about to be interrupted.
Sack and 12 quarters finally did.
While this intrusion didn't last long, as engineers were able to regain control fairly quickly, it left sports anchor Dan Rowan rather baffled.
Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I. Actually, the computer that we have running our news from time to time took off and went wild.
Roughly 2 hours after the initial intrusion, at 11:20 p.m. during WTTW's airing of an episode of Doctor Who, their signal would also be interrupted. Max was back, and over the next 90 seconds, things were about to get wild.
Jesus. Oh, I guess they're a giant masterpiece for all the greatest world newspaper nerds. My brother is wearing the other one. But it's naughty. I thought you got blood veins on it. They're coming to get me.
Max's second intrusion would conclude after having someone dressed as a maid spank his bare ass with a fly swatter. 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. It's a rather amusing statement that implies the more people aware of a secret, the more likely it is that that secret will be exposed. We can really only speculate as to what Captain Midnight would make of the modern streaming landscape. However, everything else about him, we know. Identified as John R. McDougal, he was initially brought to the attention of the FBI and FCC after he was overheard bragging about the signal takeover while talking on a rest stop payphone. Working as an engineer part-time at a satellite ground station in Ocala, Florida, he was able to use the equipment at his disposal proposal to bounce a stronger signal off HBO's satellite, blocking out the signal being transmitted from Long Island, New York. McDougal, who sold home satellite dishes, felt that the recent addition of HBO's $12.95 a month charge to unscramble their signal had been hurting his business. Agreeing to a plea deal, McDougal was fined $5,000 and given a year's probation. His amateur radio license was also suspended. We know the who, we know the how, and we know the why. All we can really say about the Max Headroom incident is that a person disguised as Coca-Cola spokesman and fictional character Max Headroom, along with their accomplices, were able to hijack the signal of 2 TV stations before disappearing, never to be heard from again. If the character of Max Headroom seems familiar and you weren't around in the mid-80s to hear his slogan, "Catch the Wave," something the intruder referenced while holding a can of Pepsi, references to Max Headroom the character can be seen in things like the 2015 film Pixels and Eminem's music video for Rap God. Over the years, there has been a fair amount of speculation as to who was behind the intrusions, from either a disgruntled former employee to the alleged leaders of a group of hackers active in the 1980s only referred to as J and K. In spite of investigations, both official and unofficial, nothing has ever been confirmed. There really wasn't much to go off, outside of an apparent dislike of WGN sports commentator Chuck Swirsky and the station as a whole calling them the greatest world newspaper nerds. The only other real clue was Max's humming of the theme tune to Clutch Cargo, a cartoon made up of 2 seasons released between 1959 and 1960. The statement, "I still see the X," being a reference to the show's final episode. This potentially suggests Max and his accomplices may have been in their 30s. In 1992, 5 years after the intrusion, the statute of limitations for any crimes they could have been charged with was surpassed, meaning if someone were to have come forward after that point, they could no longer be charged over the incident, and yet nothing. Multiple people have been able to keep the same secret for now what is more than 38 years. It's likely that we will never know for certain just exactly who was behind the intrusion, and I think that's okay. Sometimes it's the mystery that makes a thing truly special. Since we've moved away from transmitting signals through the air for the most part, broadcast intrusions have largely become a thing of the past. However, that's not to say they don't still happen. On the 23rd of November 2025, while I was working on this video, radio station ESPN 97.5 in Houston, Texas experienced an intrusion. Copying an intrusion that happened in May of 2006, the person played parts of an incredibly racist song. This being 2025, however, also directed people to follow them on social media. The old anything for attention approach. As we've seen, people commit broadcast intrusions for all sorts of reasons. I tend to like working out the reasons as to why people think the way that they do or do some of the things that they do, and there's a reason I often overlook. Sometimes people do things simply because they can. Thank you all so much for watching, and a special thanks to our top patrons JBalls902 and Joseph. I had a lot of fun with this one. In researching, I found a lot of interesting little surface level connections between broadcast intrusions. There was of course the nuclear stuff, but there were other little things, like I didn't mention it, but apparently Ashtar has been adopted by a religious group called the Universe People, which began in the Czech Republic. Not really relevant to anything, it doesn't mean the events are related, but it's not often I find myself reading about the Czech Republic, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Also, I just want to mention quickly, the Wikipedia page for the 2013 Emergency Alert System zombies currently doesn't mention anything about Utah or California. I don't know why that is. If you look at my list of sources in the description, I think it was 4 that mention either Utah or California, one being a news report from KRTV the following day, so I'm inclined to believe that it happened there as well. However, if that's wrong, I do apologise. That one was a bit of a mess to make sense of. Anyway, that'll about do it for this one. Thank you again so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like if you did, and I'll catch you next time.